Hello, I'm Dana Nye, your host for the second in the series, Makeup for the Theater. Whether for Broadway or community theater, our program gives you the basics needed to apply makeup in almost any theatrical situation. In Series 1, we covered the basics of straight makeup for male and female actors. Now we'd like to show you the techniques for aging an actor. A little later, we'll demonstrate a variety of special effects. We'll be using cream-style makeup for the base, rouge, highlights, and shadows. Since they all have the same consistency, blending is easy. For the old age makeup, it is the blending of highlights and shadows that will determine how realistic your makeup will look. To begin, you must be prepared. This means you've studied the script requirements, consulted with your director, costumer, or makeup supervisor to see what type of old age character is required. Not every old age character is alike. There are many subtle differences in characters that must be taken into consideration. Do you keep a makeup morgue? It's a collection of pictures cut out of magazines and newspapers that you can refer to for ideas like this. It's a very helpful tool. Finally, make sure that you have all the makeup you need so you have plenty of time to practice. I'd like to introduce you to Patricia Messina. She's a professional makeup artist in Los Angeles. She's done many commercials, feature films, and TV shows, but her career really began in the theater. Our model is Julie Brackenbury. She plays a leading role at the Ben Nye Company. As the lesson unfolds, Patricia has already applied the foundation to Julie's face. The foundation is Old Age. It's a sallow color that mutes a youthful skin tone. At this point, Patricia is blocking out the face with character shadow. Character shadow is a very important color to the Old Age process. It's a medium brown and purple, which means it has plenty of warmth to hold up under stage lighting. This is the process that we call blocking out the face. It gives you a chance to work with the facial feature of the individual you're making up. As the makeup progresses, it's important for Julie to do such things as raise her forehead wrinkles and to scowl and to drop her chin to see if there's a double chin that might be lurking there, and at least for future years.
The laugh lines are good?
Laugh lines are excellent. Now we're using a flat number 10 brush.
Or 12.
Yeah, or 12. Close enough. This is the nasolabial fold. And this is where you want to start with your shading. Now, some teachers ask that you use the highlights first, but my father always taught me to start using shadows, and I really am comfortable that way, and I know Patricia is too. Now we're sinking the eyes. We're actually doing the opposite of a corrective makeup here. So everywhere that we were trying to improve the last time, we might be trying to alter, sink, discolor. It's really an interesting process. It takes a lot of practice, though. And I know that I've done many in the past 20 years while I've been doing makeup and lecturing. Patricia's sinking the cheeks here, bringing down the shadow along at the front edge of that curve. She's doing a little blending at this point, but for the most part, she's leaving most of her edges hard. And
Also, what I've decided to do, Dana, is leave the forehead until last so that I can show a slightly different technique.
Good idea.
And also this part of the eye, just so we can work with different ways of doing the same thing.
Yeah, good idea. This little area where Patricia is working now is a nifty little area if you can, if your face accommodates it. It's creating or forcing the illusion of a double chin and a jowl. And as she takes the shadow underneath the chin there, she's creating the illusion, or what will be the illusion, of a double chin. Now highlights and shadows, as we mentioned earlier, blend together. So after we blend the shadows a little bit, soften them some, The next color we'll be using, or the next series that we'll be working on, are the highlighting areas. If you look just above the shadow area where Patricia's working now, you'll see the frontal bone. And as she shadows beneath it, it becomes very clear to see that there is a wonderful area where we can highlight and force a bag right below the eyebrows. At the corner of the eyes, we're creating the illusion of crow's feet or wrinkles. And in a little while, we'll show you an alternate way to create those wrinkles. Especially important for working in a small theater, like the Arena, or a very small proscenium, and definitely for anyone who's working in something like a cafeteria, or a black box, a modular theater. Now she switched from her brush to using a latex foam sponge. She's cut it on a wedge so she has a nice edge to work with, and she's taking the color and blending a little bit to the temple. As a person ages, they tend to recede up on the side of the forehead, and the temple seems to withdraw. So that's a very important area to age. Now it seems that the aging process is a step-by-step one, that as you work with the subject, you seem to add more age as you go. Even before we highlight here, you're starting to see all the planes that can be highlighted. The way Patricia's doing it, it looks really easy. But you'll find that when you go about this, you may not get all the colors in place just in the right spot. And one of the nice things about the cream-based makeup is that it allows you the opportunity to remove any lines or wrinkles that you don't like. Now you'd think, well, a makeup that is so flexible, will it hold up? Well, indeed it will hold up under the stage lights. She's wrinkling here and creating scowl lines. So cream-based makeup is very amenable to blending and alteration. Now in this makeup, we'll be trying to create an age in the late 60s, early 70s. Now you may have noticed before we really got into this program that we're going to use a wig and a hat and a shawl just to give you the final look on Julie's face when we have this project completed. Hair and costume, again, are very important in completing your character.
Julie's going to be a little old lady from Pasadena, we decided. Which is interesting in that when you're thinking about your old age, you want to think about the character, the possible origin, where this character is from, where they were raised, what kind of environment. All these things tend to show on one's face as the aging process begins.
How long have you kept your makeup morgue, Patricia? And by the way, I'd like to add that was your makeup morgue that we showed just a few minutes ago.
Well, since I started makeup in high school.
Yeah.
I won't say how long, but...
Well, just a few years ago. I know that you're just a child. But I know that my father also kept a makeup morgue, and he left us a series of notebooks that contained all kinds of photographs of beards and aged characters. In the late 50s at Fox, they did a number of musicals, including The King and I and South Pacific. And there is, if you're working full-time as a makeup artist, a morgue and a collection of pictures is invaluable.
Something I'd like to bring up right now, Dana, is I find it very useful to alternately either use a dry brush or to put the makeup on and blend it a little bit on my hand, somewhat like a palette, before going to the face, so that you don't get a chunk of makeup wherever you first begin. Everything is nice and smooth and blended.
Is that different than some traditional makeups that you've run into over the years, or?
Well, that does seem to be a common error, yes.
Yeah. Well, some makeups tend to be kind of greasy and not very colorful, whereas all of the rouges, highlights, and shadows Since they're densely pigmented, it means that a little bit goes a long ways, and using your hand as a palette is really a valuable tool. Okay, she's embellishing the side of the temple, and at this point, except for some crow's feet on the other side, which we're going to leave free for a minute, and forehead wrinkles, the shading is just about perfect. And we're going to switch to a highlight color. It's a new one for the Ben Nye Company. It's called Ultralight. We had a number of teachers who recommended that we needed something that was a little warmer. So we've experimented, and we've come up with this new color. It's actually being included in most of our makeup kits. And as you'll see, it produces a very nice looking highlight, which means that if we use it along the bridge of the nose, it allows us to thin the nose.
Wherever you've placed a shadow, a highlight is going to emphasize it twice as much. So it's the highlights together with the shadows that are creating the ultimate effect.
Highlights are kind of like a spotlight. They draw your attention too. A little highlight at the base of the nasolabial fold seems to make the depth of that fold just sink a great deal. Now we're going below that ring there, below the eye, to make a nice three-dimensional bag. Now makeup is really it's a very artistic process, and it is almost like sculpting or painting. And in a little while we're going to do something to add texture to the skin, which is going to offset some of the modeling here. You know, we all have a skin texture, and we're going to make sure that our subject has a texture that is indeed apparent. Those could be liver spots, age spots. They could be freckles left over from when she's a kid.
And again with the dry brush, blending the highlights.
Just a little more there at the base of the shadow. Doesn't that make that nasolabial fold pop? Switching to the sponge here, she can just tap it and blend it off.
Another common mistake I see a lot, Dana, is the muddying of colors.
Yeah.
It's also very important to keep your colors separate, so to speak, on the face so that they work that much harder.
Well, separate is important. I was wondering, do the highlights go below or above those horizontal shadow lines of the crow's feet?
Well, they're going to go where the skin would normally bulge out and the light would catch it.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and wrinkle for me. If you can see this, right here where that skin is bulging out is where light would hit it. And that's exactly where you're going to put your highlight. So if you're ever confused, all you have to do is have your actor contort and you can find them.
Good point. Generally, the highlights go below horizontal shadow lines. Though we put a highlight below the nasolabial fold, there also is a wonderful position above the shadow line that also makes this fold deeper and rounder. But otherwise, when we...
Also right up in here, Dana.
Yeah.
Above the temple.
Yeah, it seems as if the shadows that run vertically tend to be the exception to the rule that the highlights are always below the shadows. Now, at any step along the way, feel free to powder this makeup. This makeup doesn't take very much powder to set it. And let's say you're working in a pretty hot makeup room where it's summer stock and the humidity down in the south or the northeast is very intense. Your face seems to be getting oily. Well, don't be afraid at this point that somehow your makeup's all going to melt away. It really won't. If you see your face getting oily, just take a tissue and place it over the powder puff. Gently pat the puff with the tissue over it. Pick up the extra oil, and then go ahead and powder, even if you haven't applied the highlights. You can still apply the highlights very easily. I like to powder at least after I've applied the highlights, and maybe one other time as well. The makeup's very amendable, and this certainly helps you when you're dealing with inclement weather situations. She is, as you work here, she's becoming older, more drawn.
Okay, now this area that we've saved, we're going to come in with some stippling, and I'll show you a different technique. But before we go any further, let's go ahead and powder at this point, just because she is getting a little shiny. And I'm going to use a powder brush and very, very carefully tap the makeup.
This is the way so you don't disturb the makeup?
Right.
Now you probably can use the powder puff here as well.
Absolutely.
These duster brushes are wonderful, but they're also expensive. So it's not necessary that you use one, but
it's not imperative, no.
But the powder brush is effective, and so is the puff. Notice that the texture changes a little bit as we powder. The shine seems to be disappearing, and what is left is a matte-like appearance. Now, matte is okay. It's like the look that you see in the mirror after you wash your face with soap and water. And I might add that, of course, at the beginning of every makeup, you want to make sure that if you're making yourself up or you're making someone else up, the face is clean. You've used soap and water. If the face is oily, you can use an astringent like sea breeze to remove excess oil. If your face is very dry, use a moisturizer about 15 minutes beforehand.
Okay, here's the different technique we were talking about. I'm doing this with a stipple sponge, but it can also be done with just your regular latex sponge. Keep wrinkling.
Can you start to see what's happening here? Or can you guess?
This highlighter is catching the folds of the skin. And when she releases, we'll be left with the hollows to fill in with your character shadow. Okay, right in here.
Okay, squint real hard. Now those of you who might be watching this program that are, say, 16 or younger, perhaps you don't have these wrinkles yet, but with time you will. I hope you're not going to be too disappointed that you might not be able to do this. You might want to practice this, say, on your mom or your dad, or your makeup instructor for that matter.
Again.
But when she relaxes, those ridges give you a nifty little roadmap of where those wrinkles really lie. And I might add, for an intimate theater, you just about can't go wrong with highlighting this way. If you find that your subject allows you to highlight this way, by all means, put the highlights in first and then put in your shading.
That's exactly what this is, Dana, is a road map. It lets you see exactly where your shadows or character shadow is going. Something to remember when you're doing the forehead area is rather than having one continuous line, you'll get a lot more realism if you keep them broken.
Mm-hmm. You've certainly got me convinced.
Turn that way.
A little caution about those wrinkles. The more intimate of a stage you're working in, the more complex the wrinkles around the eyes or the crow's feet may be. If you're working on a main stage situation, where you are working quite a few feet away from the audience, don't bother to make a very complex set of wrinkles around the eyes. They'll all blend together, and those audience members, say in the first third of the house, probably won't be able to see them. Maybe 3 at the most, maybe a 4th wrinkle coming outward and upward. But if you're working in a small theater, like a black box, then you can afford to be a little fancier. The audience member obviously is going to be close and be able to appreciate the definition that you put into your makeup.
Chin up.
Now, this is a very important area that Patricia's moved into.
This way. This way.
A woman who is playing a role in the, well, let's say now, early 70s, is going to have a neck that's going to show some age as well. And there's several important areas that recede if Julie will turn her head even farther away from me. You can see there's a tendon there that becomes exposed. And on either side of that tendon you want to shade. And on the high point of the tendon you'll highlight. And this will actually show you the outline of where this tendon might be someday. Many, many years from now for Julie. Notice there's a number of horizontal wrinkles that seem to already be in place. A pencil is a wonderful way to put those wrinkles in, and we'll see that in just a minute or two. But you can see that cord popping out now with the use of the ultralight highlight. She'll turn the other way, forcing the cord on the other side to expose itself. And now we're tying the whole makeup together. Now obviously we've taken into consideration costume. We've discussed the idea of this old age with the costumer, and he or she has said, okay, we're not going to have a high neckline, we're going to expose the neck.
Further.
Or some of it anyway. If there was a high neck costume, obviously this would be lost. And if you went to the trouble to do this, you'd have a dirty costume real quick.
Okay.
Very nice.
Getting back to judging distance, Dana, I remember an old theater trick that I used to use when doing makeup was to look into the mirror, and whatever the distance was between you and the mirror, if you double that, that's what your makeup will look like from that particular distance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So rather than having to go stand back that far, you can instantly see how well your character makeup is reading.
Yeah, it's important to stand back from the mirror. And if you're say standing back 6 feet, your eye perceives 6 feet in and 6 feet out, so that gives you 12 feet of perspective. If I'm going out and lecturing, I'm at a disadvantage not having a mirror to work into. And Patricia, I'm afraid, has the same disadvantage today, but I think that you'll accept that because it makes it so easy for us to demonstrate for you today. And we want you to see up close how this is done. So it won't be so mystifying for you next time you go into the makeup room and start this old age process. Notice these horizontal wrinkle lines went on a little bit on the hard side, and with the sponge she was easily able to soften them. Now the highlights and shadows are pretty well in place at this point. There's a complementary shadow called the Misty Violet that is a very nice one to go back in and say deepen a nasal labial fold. And that's called the CL17. It's a mixture of dark brown and purple. It's kind of a little bit of a gray there too.
We're going to use that now, Dana, just to show how much more intense you can make this if you need to.
And I might add that with the addition of Misty Violet, that we're really pushing the age now. We may be going beyond the early 70s to a little old lady from Pasadena that may be pushing 80. And it's nice to be able to do that fairly simply here, extending out the crow's feet. And it's a dramatic color. So you want to make sure it's not applied too heavy. Be deft, be precise. Notice how Patricia just uses the end of the brush rather than the flat of the brush. You know, in a prior session, we discussed the tech rehearsal or the dress rehearsal. This is still very important for Julie if she's about ready to go on stage. There may be some further adjustments that are necessary. The lighting may make a difference that she hadn't planned on. The gels might be either accentuating these wrinkles or sadly, diminishing some of them. So there's always some adjustments that you've got to plan on. Don't be disappointed if you need to brighten the color. And I'd like to say that there's nothing wrong with adding and blending colors together. We feel like we have a very comprehensive palette of colors, but heck, there's so many of shades that are required. I don't think any manufacturer has every color that's required, so you might want to blend your own colors. We're going to heighten that cheekbone a bit here. And the next step to kind of bring the whole thing together here is going to be some stippling. And I bet that most of you at this point have used that black stipple sponge. You know, we were the first ones to introduce the stipple sponge in the early 70s. And it's a common material in just about everyone's makeup kit today. It's a coarse pore sponge, and it gives texture. And that's something that we're going to start adding here in a minute.
First, Dane, I'm going to come in with a little bit of lines into the mouth area.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, you'll be most successful with these if you keep them staggered and not the same, not identical. In other words, they should be at an angle. They should be some short, some long, and applied in a somewhat haphazard way. Not too planned.
Mm-hmm. You know, I just realized that I got ahead of myself here, and we're still going to show them.
A little bit of white.
Yeah, a little bit of white. White is very important to use before you go to stipple. Because when you stipple, you're going to go over the white, you're going to go over the shadows, and that's one key way to make sure that you don't muddy up your highlights and shadows. Now you might say, well, white, isn't that an awfully brash color to use? Well, yes and no. If you're working in a small theater, black box, an arena, cafeteria, well, the people in the front 5 rows might be aware of the starkness. However, if you're working in a larger theater, I think that you'll find that even though you've powdered, you can still add a brighter color and you can blend it into the powdered base or the powdered highlights. And then you can get rid of that white look. It won't be deceitful. I do a lot of lecturing throughout the year, and I know that just about all of the college teachers that I talk to will use white, will recommend that their students use white in their makeup class. It's another way to make those shadows pop, and they especially need to pop on the larger stage because distance will tend to soften the highlights and the shadows. We've got another trick coming up for the lips here in just a few minutes.
So basically this white is doing what the purple did, and it's just carrying it a little further. Now you can see, even though two different techniques have been used on each of these eyes, they're giving you the same effect.
We've added to the subtle effect on Patricia's closest side at this point. We're trying to balance the makeup so it's continuous. We've gone beyond a little bit of that subtlety that we'd achieved as she wrinkled those crow's feet. And I suggest that as you have the opportunity, review this tape and take a look at the transformation, because it was gradual. And this transformation will be enhanced in your own way as you practice and experiment. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Use your ingenuity. Study the people around you. All of your experience is useful in creating makeup, just as in the eyes of the artist.
And this is fun. This
Yeah.
is one of the most fun makeups you can do, I think.
Yeah, it really is. It's also one of the toughest as well, but it really is a good one.
Okay, now we're going to come in with a little bit of stippling to add some extra texture. And this is the age stipple wheel. Okay, wrinkle up.
The first color that she's picked up is called capillary stipple, and that's something that might be common among older men and women. Their capillaries may be more transparent, their skin is thinner, and again she's having Julie lift her forehead wrinkles. Work with your facial features. Push every possibility that you can create out to make this process. Well, you can certainly give your muscles a good workout when you're doing makeup.
If you're dealing with a young face, also this stippling effect tends to make the face appear less smooth and thereby aging the face. It's wonderful on the nose and cheeks.
Yeah, it breaks up that mottled look, as my dad used to say. Especially important on those youthful faces, many of whom are in the high school level. My dad used to call them, some of them, the billiard ball faces, just pretty round, without too much definition. And I bet that some of you have been in that position so far already. You've had to create that old age look. Now, we're going to use the natural number 7 lip color here. This is a color that is perfect for putting down on the lips when you don't want a red, although, say for the little old lady in Pasadena, you might want to go for a nice red color. However, if you want to experiment here and see if you want maybe a more neutral shade, the natural 7 is a good way to go. Now there's a trick that we're going to show you.
But for now, if you don't want a lipstick color, a little trick to do, you can either use your finger or your latex sponge, is to have your actor pucker up as much as possible, and also if they bring the lips in towards them, I find that you get more wrinkles, but keep puckering. More, just like. Perfect. Release. Then when they release, you'll see the cracks with the natural 7 showing through.
Voila! Now, if you wish, you could take a lining pencil, such as, say, the Brandy lip color pencil, and you can just go in between those little wrinkles on the lips and break up those lips even more.
Dana, I'm using that same Brandy pencil right now on what is known as the table of the eye. It's the area right above the lashes. And with the aging effect, what happens is this area tends to fall or bend outward. So in essence, what happens is it becomes an area that looks more red.
Mm-hmm. Very effective. Be careful that no one is distracting you when you're putting that red or that red type color up in the table of the eye. Now these pencils are made out of a vegetable coloring base, so they shouldn't harm your eye.
Also, as you can see, I've been touching her face, and because we powdered, it's just fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're just about done here. Patricia's taking a little bit of white, and I'll let you in on a little secret here. She's using clown white, and you might think, whoa, clown white on an old age makeup. Well, it's a little bit like using mascara on the lashes. Clown white, the traditional clown white that we make, it's heavy and it holds well. And you can put it on the lashes, you can put it on the eyebrows, and it'll hold. You may use a white liner, which is lighter, but this is just another way to go about it.
Also, Dana, I wanted to show the silver gray hair color. And we're going to put a little of this on the brows.
I might add that please shake it well. You know, there's a silver material that's at the bottom, and you shake it up, goes in suspension with this ochre color, and it makes a wonderful effect. But you have to shake it up sometimes, maybe 5-6 minutes, till you see the bubbles through the bottom.
You can take any excess off on a tissue. Close your eyes. And when aging takes place, eyebrows, for some reason or another, become more wavy. And by brushing the eyebrows backwards, you'll achieve this effect as well.
I'd like to tell you that if you're looking for a very nice looking hair color, this is a wonderful way to go, as opposed to using those sprays. Sprays set the hair like hairspray, and they're very hard to manage. But if you take a toothbrush and work section by section through the hair, you can do a wonderful job in coloring the hair. The correlate to the silver hair gray is the Snow White hair color, which is very similar to Max Factor's original Supreme White hair color. Now, what's she doing now?
These are some age spots. Once again, I'm using the age stipple wheel. And these will be noticed more often in intimate theater. And of course, if you're doing the hands, this would be the ideal place. Not too many of these.
Not too many, but just enough to, again, add a little bit of irregularity to her skin tone. Well, I think we've reached a very nice stopping point. And we've got a couple little tricks up our sleeve here just to complete the illusion for you. But because after all, this is an illusion.
Okay.
And you don't want your audience to know that Julie is really just a kid. Very nice.
Oh, I think we have our little old lady from Pasadena.
Oh, we sure do. She looks great. As you can see, we're ready for curtain. Patricia and Julie, this has been a wonderful makeup. Here's a list of some of the products we used. For the cream foundation, the Old Age. Cream shadow was Character Shadow and the Misty Violet. Cream highlight, well, we used the Ultralight and some white. The pencil was the Brandy. We used the Effects Wheel Old Age. The face powder was the Fair Translucent, and at this point, by the way, we might knock in just a little bit of Misty Pink just to punch up those cheeks. The lip color was the Natural No. 7, and of course we used the Silver Hair Gray. Now, as you can see, the actor has something to work with. The better your makeup job, the more comfortable the actor will be playing an older role. As you can see, this particular role is one of the toughest to play. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of practice. So when it comes to makeup, keep at it. In our program to follow, we'll be looking into some very special effects with makeup. Thanks for being with us for Ben Nye's Makeup for the Theater.